Hi, my name is Miguel Colon. As said, I've been here before to actually speak a bit about my project. I have the book here, CloudSea. Uh, it was in 1920s Americana inspired setting for 5th edition D&D. Done almost solely by two people as far as writing and layout goes, and just it was touched on many topics such that are maybe uncomfortable to people uh, in the realm of fantasy, such as the topics of racism, especially in the 1920 setting, because not the greatest time for everyone, discrimination, things of the sort, and we ran a successful Kickstarter for that. Raised about 333% of our goal, and I am extremely grateful to everyone, including Alexandria RPG, because and they actually helped out with the donations and spreading the word. So it was a great help. I'd like to thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we saw it. We liked what you were putting together. We liked the cool Art Deco theme that you were building, and um, we'd like to see where you're at now. So your Kickstarter was successful, and do you have anything that you would like to uh, show off the
Well,
this weekend?
yes. This weekend, first things first. Something I think you might like is we for the backer goals. We had to do all the backer goals before sending out the print books, and now those are done. We have officially reached the end stage of the current project. Uh, Everybody should be getting should have gotten emails from DriveThruRPG for their redemption codes, and there's just one backer reward that I'd just like to show off. It's a character here called the Librarian, and a picture of this character right there. I think some of your viewers may see some inspiration.
Nice. I dig it. That makes me it makes me laugh.
But yes, there were quite a few characters added onto the base book, as well as detailed descriptions of what's really going on in the setting, because the book is written in the form of an unreliable narrator. The book is written by, well, in universe by the Minister of Truth, or we can say propaganda. Uh, uh, but there is a section of the book once we get to the backer rewards uh, that, well, it's top secret.
Nice.
So everything from that point forward is told from the perspective of the same Minister of Truth, but this time declassifying a lot of the information, not using all the flowery language, uh, and going into all the things that, all the deep and dark secrets of the setting. Um, Very much 1984 inspired. Very much you have the Minister of Propaganda that's on the nose. You have the party, which is in charge of everything. An eclectic mix of an authoritarian government and religious cult.
Like to remind everybody that's going to play this, or that reads the book 1984, uh, they're games, they're books, They're not manuals of how to become a politician or what you should do in politics.
Yes, that was fun. It's funny that you should mention that because that was one of the main concerns that a lot of people had when I showed this book to them. I was in back when we were still planning this out. Um, it was brought to my attention on several occasions. But what if people take away the wrong message?
And that's something you just kind of have to live with, because no matter how, you know, someone's going to take whatever you do the wrong way, and it just happens no matter what you do. I mean, look at the guy that um, shot Reagan. He did it because he wanted Jodie Foster to notice him. It's like, I don't think Jodie Foster gave him any signals that uh, she was interested in this guy. But I mean, that's an extreme example, but I mean, no matter what you do, somebody's going to take it the wrong way, and you can't necessarily dwell on those fringe that are going to either, well, the fringe that are either going to take everything the wrong way, or the fringe that want you to change what you've built or who you are to fit them.
Right. It's one of those things that I took the advice into consideration and tried to give a few wink wink nudge nudge. Hey, this is the bad guy here. Don't listen to what they're saying. Quotes such as the tried and true classic. Listen, I'm not discriminatory because I have Android friends. You see.
But all androids are bad. I thought, isn't that what the new Picard trope is pushing out?
But that's sort of what we went into with this setting, and I think that there is a lot more to explore in this world. This is not the end of the CloudSea line, as it were. Um, we have currently the book is sitting pretty at about 150 pages.
Not bad.
And very proud of the work done so far. But when looking at it, it was the sort of thing where it's like, there's more to this world. There are so many secrets in this world. There are so many different avenues you can explore in this world. Um, I originally liked to. I don't remember where I heard the phrase, but I do know that I heard it from somewhere. I describe it as hope punk.
Hope punk. That's a new one. I haven't heard that before.
Not mine, I have to say. Not my creation. But the idea of a punk type setting, but um, the odds are stacked against the heroes. It is dystopian, but it is clear that the heroes can win. It's not oppressive in the same way something like Cyberpunk 2020 was.
Um, what are some struggles that you've had since the closeout of the Kickstarter to getting to where the book is a physical product?
Well, struggles. The struggles actually started a little before the closeout of the book. We, uh, I'm not going to call anyone out or name names, but there were issues with there were issue. I'm trying to phrase this in such a way that it's
Diplomatic.
amicable, diplomatic. Yes. Um, there were issues with one of the backer awards, not the backer's fault, but in procuring art for that backer. And the backer had to be refunded their purchase because obtaining that art would have proven impossible at that point in time. And we were at the point where we wanted to send out the PDFs. Uh, we already had art in a similar style to other things, so couldn't find another artist to uh, emulate the style. And so the backer was refunded their reward after having a conversation with them. I happened to know this backer, so everything was okay between us. They understood, and that's when we sent out the PDFs, minus the one character that.
Sometimes it sucks, but sometimes you have to make those decisions. And luckily, you were able to reach out to the individual. Somebody you said somebody you knew, so um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that
Um,
makes it personally tough. But when it comes down to it, business wise, you've got to business and personal have to be separate, or you'll
right.
one you'll lose yourself, and two you'll end up making bad decisions because if you would have been like, no, this is somebody I know, we got to do it for them, and you just would have pushed the product back, and would have been a bad message for everyone else.
Right, and speaking of pushing the product back, that's another no, that is another difficulty. We underestimated things, or I should say, I underestimated things
That's pretty common in in Kickstarters.
as far as when the timetable. So I estimated, you know what, we can have everything done by October 2021. That did not happen. That did not happen. It took until January 2021 to get the physical books out. 2022, I'm sorry, to get the physical books out. But now the physical books are out. It took 3 months longer than expected. Now I know for the next project moving forward, give myself a bit of breathing room, be more realistic about things because you never know when things are going to go
Yeah,
wrong.
overestimate on your timeline, so that when you hit a mark early, it's good. And because when you tell somebody, if you would have said, "Hey, we'll be ready by March 2022," and if you had the books out January 2022, everybody been like, "Man, that was awesome."
Yeah.
Whereas and 3 months is not that bad for a Kickstarter. But I do like to try to get people that are getting ready to start Kickstarters, give yourself a little more breathing room. If you think it's going to take 6 months once you're done, give yourself 9. Uh,
Yeah, no, that's something I learned, and it's a very valuable lesson, especially because this is not the last time I plan to pursue this avenue of going through things and crowdfunding. In fact, in our latest backer message update, we announced more on CloudSea. Like, what's going on in the world of CloudSea? Is the line done? No, no, it's not. We announced a product called Pirates of CloudSea. Uh, and in the CloudSea book, pirates, sky pirates, I should say, are these opportunistic sorts of people who go around flying airplanes because, well, that's the way they can get around and stealing things from other people, like real pirates. Uh, they just happen to do so with cool aviator jackets, uh,
and scarves flowing in the
scarves.
wind.
But in the latest update, we released more than just the title. We released some of the art for Pirates of CloudSea, and I think that we didn't say exactly what we're doing for Pirates, but if for people who look at the art style, they're going to notice that I guess it's kind of an open secret, so I can release it here. Uh, We're planning to combine elements of a 5e adventure and a visual novel.
Oh, nice.
Uh, Attempting to do both, focus on the same subject, with the same Kickstarter. Uh, that I'm not going to put a date on, because things are still in the works and there's budgetary things to come up with, art to come up with, uh, scripts to write,
Yeah,
coding to be done.
there's a lot more in entail, especially if you've been on the creative side of doing books and stuff. Getting into doing the audio and video production side is considerably more work than people realize. And
Yes, I thankfully have a little bit of experience with coding, about 2 years worth of experience. So jumping into doing this isn't the most daunting task in the world, but it's still going to take time.
yes,
It's very time consuming.
scripts and then sitting back and forth, back and forth with your voice artists, your art, how you put everything together. Then once you put a final product together, then you watch it and you're like, none of this makes sense. We
Um,
got a couple questions in the chat. So first,
sure.
someone comes across CloudSea sitting on a shelf at Names and Baubles. When they pick it up, what will draw the random shopper to your book?
What will draw the random shopper to the book? I think it has to be the art style. The artists did an amazing job. Yes, they can turn the book around and read the back of it, but that's not what they're going to look at first. They're probably going to flip through a few pages and see some of the great art by one Rick Hershey, for example. Uh, uh, Rick Hershey, I've known him for a while. He got me my start in RPGs, and great artist, head of Fat Goblin Games. Uh, great artist, great boss. Uh, and though this was not for Fat Goblin, this was for Beyond the Horizon. Uh, I would definitely say the art's what's going to draw people in, and they're gonna come for the art, stay for the writing.
Nice. Yeah, I always tell people never to underestimate what art can do for your RPG, because I have seen some great games with bad art that people just pass over, and then I've seen some really bad games with just stunning art and people eat it up, and they sell books. Somebody attempts to play the game, they're like, "This game's horrible," but they bought it for the art, and sadly, people keep buying it for the art.
Yeah.
There's a handful
I
of games I know that are like that, from some mid-sized companies that really understand the aesthetics. I mean, to be honest, Free League, they could, how beautiful their products are, they could probably put out bad games and sell books, but they wouldn't put out too many bad games because the word would get out. But I mean, they get the aesthetics.
I have noted that it's good to find an artist that you're comfortable with and stick with them. Like, make them your best friend, because you're going to want to develop a relationship with an artist, such that you know their prices, you know their timetables, so that you can work with them, work around their schedule, and that's what we did here.
Yeah, and it also helps that if you know them well, if you give a description of something, and maybe you know they get a broader idea off of knowing you, and your descriptions go like, well, let me try something a little different, because they know they get a little leeway, and they may come up with something that's far better than what you were initially trying to just describe, because sometimes we have a vision in our heads of what we want, and the words just don't come out quite right. So hopefully, building that relationship with the artist, you can say, "Hey, I want A, B, C," and they come up with A through G, and you're like, "Wow, that was way more than what I said, but that is exactly what was in my brain."
It's a skill in GMing. I've learned. Listen to your players because sometimes they have ideas that are better than yours.
That too. You, working on a team is it's important to learn the strengths of communication. In the military, we harp on it, and we also are really horrible at it at the same time. I think most people are they most companies at all sizes and government, they all like, oh, we need to work on communication, and yet we're all really bad at it. We're just kind of bad communicating as humans as a whole. Most relationships end over communication.
Yeah. Um,
We got another question in the chat. So, using D&D 5e as rule skeleton was using D&D 5e always the plan from the start, or were there other systems considered, or even starting a new one from scratch? And why was the rule set Why was that rule set dismissed from 5e?
so Pathfinder 1. That's the easy answer. And Pathfinder 1 is where I have my roots as an RPG writer, a game designer, and that was the first pick that I thought, yes, I want this. But then I thought more about it, and I realized that for the stories that I want to tell, D&D 5e and the message that I wanted to bring out for CloudSea, because CloudSea has a message behind it. I like to think so, at least. If there's no message behind it, I failed as a writer. But I figured that at that point, 5e would bring. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not saying anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 5e was the system that would bring the most eyes to it, and thus the most people would be able to see that message. Um, I I I think that it could have worked in Pathfinder 1. That was always a consideration, but I wanted to. I've said this once before. I kind of wanted to get up on a soapbox, and I think we're all allowed that at some point. Uh, and on my soapbox, I wanted to say, "Here, this. Listen to some of the things that I'm saying here, because I took ideas from very smart people who are much better at explaining the world than I am, uh, and want to share that in a form that I think we as gamers can more easily relate to."
All right. One of the things, like, looking through things, is you've been very adamant about the message that you were building, and I like that the message is there in the story, but you're not clubbing people over the head with it at the same time. Like, it's the setting, it's the story, but you're not doing it in such a way that it overtakes the game and the setting. Is there's people that have a message, and then they forget how to share that in a way that people actually want to interact with it.
I I I think part of the reason is for that is that I took a lot of inspiration from not just one totalitarian regime, um, but multiple totalitarian regimes which controlled people, and and the idea of like a secret police bringing people in and brainwashing them. Orwell is prophetic in that, yeah, no, there were regimes that actually brought people into these prison camps and tried to do their best to break them and get them to their side through, well, in this case, a lot of magic. Uh, uh, but it's the sort of thing that it's a part of the setting. As you said, I didn't want to beat people over the head with it, and that's why I chose the narrator I did. Because it would have been easy to have the narrator be uh, someone who is on the side of good, and it's like, look at all the bad things that are happening. This is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. But um, letting people, I trust the audience. I trust the audience is smart enough to figure out, oh, that's actually what he's saying.
Nice.
Oh, that's what's going on.
I like the I like that comment that you trust the audience, and that kind of goes back to the people raising the fear of somebody doing learning bad uh, um, from the game, but you have to put something out with that trust, and it's nice because again putting it out there so that you're not just clubbing people over the head. And some people may not get the message you're going for and just like the setting that you've created, which is still okay because you've created an interesting world that some people may just want to play and exist in. Um, and hopefully they will get your message after playing it in enough time.
Yeah. I, 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 I'm an optimist. That's why I like the term hope punk. Uh, I think that people will generally, like most people who see this, they're gonna see it and go, okay, it's obvious who the bad guys are. It's obvious that this is an unreliable narrator. They've, uh, they've. It's cute that this is the way they're going. But and there is also complexity to things that I added to the story. There's one character in the section on Nimbus nymphs, one of the races in the setting, uh, that she worked for the military for the party, but she's not in on all the secrets. She doesn't know that she's working for the bad guys, and that's very easy to it's very easy to forget that there are people who are born and raised into a really bad system and taught nothing else, that they can be wrong without necessarily being maliciously wrong. Like if you were to sit down with them and show them the facts of the case, and I like to think, again, hope, uh, that there are a lot of people who would go like, oh my god, I can't believe I've been so blind.
I like people having having that hope. It's a good thing in the world. Um, let's see. What are like in the production of the book? So you talked about that one particular reward, but once the euphoria of closing out the like, all right, we were funded, this is awesome. What was kind of what was your schedule and timeline of panic and insanity?
Writing. Um, there were it was at the point. So I learned later that um, artists, as it turns out, have schedules. And just because you go
Good
to an
artists have
artist,
schedules.
yes, good artists have schedules, and I hired very good artists. Um, so you can't just go to an artist, say, "Hey, here's X amount of money. Let's see if we can't get this done in a week." No, no. What I should have done was, at the moment things got funded, talked to the artists instead of waiting for the writing to be done, and said, "Hey, how about we schedule things now so that the art can be done before the writing?" Because the writing, once the book's laid out and everything, like the writing can, uh, the writing can in some ways go a lot quicker. Uh, like being able to see, okay, that's what I'm working with. Like that's what the character looks like. That's what the personality that we're gonna give them. Okay, I can work with that instead, and to use the inspiration from the art. But mistakes were made. Not gonna happen again. Uh,
No,
because
you gotta make new mistakes next time.
yeah, nobody's perfect.
Nice. Like that's actually really good advice because I have talked to other people that I don't think they learned from their mistake of taking artists for granted. Because they're like, oh, all the writing's pretty much done, and we're good to go. The Kickstarter is basically to get the art done and to get the book made, and then they're like, oh man, all these artists, they just take so long to get things back. I'm like, well, what did you ask of one of the artists? And he's like, oh well, we wanted 11 images from him. I was like, that's not something they're going to create for you in the matter of just a couple weeks, unless they're a crazy prolific artist. It's going to take time.
Yes, and that is definitely something learned. Appreciate your artists,
Yeah,
people. They work hard, and
and
they
and many of them have a day job as well. So
yes,
they're working their day job, coming home, and doing a second job, which just because you think it doesn't take long doesn't mean it's done overnight. There's a process to it. Um,
right. It's the sort of thing where if I can go back and tell myself, uh, and just talk to myself, those are the two things that I would say. A, get the artist scheduled beforehand. Like as soon as I hit the funding goal, I should have talked to the artists. Not wait for the Kickstarter to end. Like, okay, I know we're funded. Let's talk to the artists now, instead of 15 days from now when the Kickstarter finally ends.
yeah.
Um, and two, I would set a more realistic end goal. Just give myself a little bit of breathing room, just in case.
Those are both great pieces of advice, and um, yeah, we need to get on. I got to start reviewing all our previous interviews so I can start pulling all the Kickstarter advice for people. That way, hopefully the next generation of game designers aren't running into all the same issues. And it's funny because talking with people that work for game companies, the art directors and stuff, and things that we've talked about here are the same things that art directors have to learn when they first become an art director if they haven't learned them leading up to that. And they're like, oh, I can do this. I know tons of artists. And they're like, why is it taking so long? Like, well, you didn't give your artists enough lead time. You haven't given enough time to, actually do the product. You didn't give them a good description. You were vague. So,
Yeah.
they're the more accurate your description of what you want is, the better. That's why early Magic cards, they just went out and they bought art to slap onto cards, and some people that work there even just drew art. And then they brought an art director in, and she came in. Oh, why can't I think of her name? You can look her up. She was, I think, 5th edition Magic, and you can see just a massive change in uh, the aesthetic of not only the art, but there was a cohesive nature. When they came out with a new species for Magic, all of all the creatures looked the same. She did a wonderful job because she went out and found artists, said, "Hey, this is what the creatures need to look like, and you can do everything else that you want, but it has to be it has to describe this. This is the name of the card, and this is what the monster looks like." So, and she did a great job of finding good artists, giving them left and right boundaries, and understanding their workflows.
Right. And it's something that I'm going to carry over to my upcoming projects. I mentioned one, which is also going to be for Beyond the Horizon, the Pirates of CloudSea. There's also one that I'm working on now that still in its early stages. This one I can actually freely talk about, but I'm not sure if you're at all interested. um, um, it's a project that funny enough, one of the comments said, why didn't you build your own system? Well, I'm building my own system. It's very hard to do. uh, uh, but um, it's something for that system that I realized that uh, the system, well, naturally has to come with its setting, because I don't think many people are going to be interested in here's a system neutral rules document for a game that you've never played and have no faith in the designer for. So good luck, have fun. Uh, um, while some people can get away with that, I'm not going to say that I am one of the people whose names are big enough out there to be able to do that. So um, I'm coming up with that, coming up with the setting behind it, and with the setting comes the art. Back to that. Um, taking inspiration from my previous successes, as well as just like I said with CloudSea, how I took inspiration from a variety of different sources, taking inspiration for the new setting as well as the game, because I guarantee you that uh, anything that I can come up with, somebody has done something similar. Uh, if not the same. Uh, I just have to do my research. Making, if you don't mind me speaking a little bit about it, or if you want to stop it
No,
right there.
no, go ahead, keep going.
Uh, the idea is a uh, modular class system with a D6 that's D6 based in nature. The entire game would be d6, no other dice, and that's for skills, combat. Uh, so taking a bit of inspiration from Shadowrun, 5th edition Shadowrun, uh, is where I saw this, but we're not taking that roll a 5 or a 6 and that's a hit. It's instead a pool system, roll all the dice, add the total. So as you level up, you gain more dice to your dice pool. Uh, 21 different classes based on the tarot. Uh, and going from there, very much based on, again, Shadowrun 5th edition, and a little game that I'm not sure if you've heard of, but as it's not an official game, but it's called PTU, Pokemon Tabletop United.
Heard of it, have not looked through it.
Very good game system. I am amazed that people came up with it because, uh, for all intents and purposes, I looked at it the first time I looked at it, I said, "This should not be able to work,"
Yeah.
and it somehow does.
And somebody reminded me in chat while I was away. They played a game of Pokemon here on the channel.
Huh. Uh, but yeah, no, those are my two inspirations for. The best way to describe the class system would be: have you played the game Borderlands?
The on
The
console.
the console game,
Yeah,
yes.
played the
Um,
first one. Yes.
so imagine being able to take any of the skill trees from any of the characters, choose three, and those are the skills that you can level up each level. Each level you get to take one perk from that skill tree, one feature, and add it up. So instead of like a D&D Pathfinder, at level 1 rogue, you gain sneak attack 1d6 and thieves cont. It looks a lot more like, okay, you took one level you took one rogue feature. Which rogue feature did you take? Did you take evasion? Did you take sneak attack? Did you take that sort of thing?
Okay.
And you can do that for up to a number of classes. Still working out the exact number of classes you can take at once. There are 21 tarot cards, so lots of different combinations to be had.
Interesting. If you're looking at D6s and dice pools, look up. It's based on the old Star Wars West End Games system. It's called Open D6, so it's a open platform that you can use for building RPGs off of. But it's D6 based. It's dice pools, and it also has exploding dice, which are can be a lot of fun. Um, so there might be somebody's already worked out might have already worked out a couple things that you're trying to figure out, and that's just another resource to grab from if you're looking at six D6s. Because Shadowrun's got some really cool mechanics. Sounds like you've got some neat ideas that you're heading down with, but you know can't copyright or you can't patent a game mechanic. So um, go ahead and find all the different D6 systems out there, and somebody may have already um, you know smoothed the wheel out so you don't have to reinvent it.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for not only me but a lot of game designers to know. Do your research. Even if you're sticking to a single system like 5e, um, and you want to say, I want to make a punk game. On the subject of punk, I want to make a punk game. Or I want to make a Lovecraftian game. Well, so let's add punk to let's say I want to make a punk setting that has to do with volcanoes. Well, somebody's already done that. It's on Kickstarter now, if I recall. um, Frostpunk. Yeah, no, somebody's done that. So if you want to go with that route, what's something new you can bring to the table so you're not just outright plagiarizing?
Yeah. Well, that's why, I think we briefly touched on it last time you were on. Is you brought up Cthulhu. One that I loved was set in the same time frame. It was Harlem Unbound. He took, hey, we're gonna do the Cthulhu base system. It's because it's written on those rules and everything. But we're gonna do it in Harlem in the 1920s versus doing it in some random town or coastal village or whatever. And did a great job of taking a known system and mixing it with a known historical setting and giving us something entirely new. Because I mean, not a whole lot of games based in the 1920s, and There's not a whole lot of because most of the Cthulhu games they try to they try to stay out of major cities, whereas he delved right into it.
Yeah, it's all about innovation, but uh, and seeing what people have done before, what your predecessors have done, because you've got to respect the work that people have done before, because you can learn from where they succeeded, you can learn from where they failed, you can learn from what people liked, didn't like about the system or the setting, what problems arose out of it, and if there are any parts that you want to take that are that inspire you, well, uh, try to build off that. Don't I like to that's how I like to put it. Don't steal, build on the base of something.
Well, don't plagiarize, borrow. Somebody had a good question back here that I wanted to see. Um, because we haven't had a lot of people that really have done much with DriveThruRPG, and I thought you did it in a really unique way because you kept your on your Kickstarter. You were able to keep uh, your point of entry much lower than people because you said, "Hey, if you back at this level, you get a discount code to buy it off of DriveThruRPG." So I thought that was really unique. So their question is, how was DriveThruRPG? How has DriveThruRPG worked out for you? Did the book printing? Did they do book printing for physical books, and how consistent was their quality?
This book right here actually came from DriveThruRPG. So yes, they do physical books. Nice gloss cover. I'm not sure if you can see it, so I'm just gonna describe it. Uh, doesn't quite have that new book smell, but the pages high quality paper. It's not flimsy paper. The binding is very good. Uh, it's not one of those books that are falling apart. So DriveThruRPG has done us well. Um, uh, that said, they are, according to them, experiencing difficulties. So we what we did was we set it to at cost. So mm, none of the money they get a discount code and backed at a certain level, and at that point they don't have to pay us any money, but they have to pay for the printing, shipping, and handling. Right now, that is slightly tricky with DriveThruRPG because, according to their own site, hey, we're experiencing troubles because of the global situation. Uh, and so things might be a little pricier. This cost around $12 to print and ship to the United States. I should probably mention that because I'm unaware of what it's like for international shipping right now.
Yeah,
Um, that said, it took me about 2 weeks to get my book. They said anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, so that worked out. But drive-through has been a blast. They made things very easy for us, and admittedly, I think some of their emails got lost in people's spam folders. Because I had people sending me messages saying, "Hey, I didn't get my I didn't get my code," and it's like for the PDF, for example, and it's like, "Oh, you didn't? Okay. Try now. Sent it again."
well, and if their email is the same as their DriveThruRPG email, as soon as you input it into the system for a discount, it'll be if they log into DriveThru, they should have saying, "Hey, here's your discount code for the book. But I don't think most people really, if they do that, they don't check their drive-through account, because I just logged into mine, and it's been a little while, and I've got 100 messages of books for the library. that It's one I've got to be a little more up on, because we get people that'll send us PDFs of books all the time, and I love getting the PDFs and everything, but man, I have so many books to already go through. Um, Looking at PDFs of games that sadly sometimes just never will be physical books, because some people don't have that option. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm a type of person, like I like having the PDFs, but I will sit down and read an actual physical book. It sticks with me better, and it's nice to have the PDF for quick reference, but it's better to me to have the physical book to sit down and actually learn from.
Yes, I definitely agree with you there. Something that I've recently been doing is going back and uh, claiming my contributors' copies of all the books that I've written.
Nice.
Like, hi, I know that you sent me the PDF. That's nice and all. I would really love to have this book on my shelf.
Yeah. It's an entirely different thing, and then there's actual scientific research behind um, the majority of people actually retain far better sitting down with a physical book. Um, so reading a PDF on your screen is reading wise is like one of the lowest. If you read it in a ebook, that's higher, but if you read it in a physical book, it's even higher. So um, I really try to encourage people to find the physical book, especially for a game where you've got to read the rules and hopefully retain the rules so that you understand what's going on while you're sitting at a table, and how to make a character, so that you
Right.
have to reference back to things far less.
Yeah, definitely, and it's one of the things that I'm glad for, because Pirates of CloudSea, I've alluded to it. It's going to be a visual novel, but also an accompanying 5e adventure. This is one of the opportunities that I have to actually use a previous source of work, the original CloudSea, and decide, hey, why not make a deluxe version of CloudSea instead of having this yeah, you can have the adventure as its own thing, but why not make this is a couple of pages away from making a hardcover, so add 30, 40 pages onto it, and hey, you've got yourself a hardcover version of CloudSea.
Nice. And um, using and make sure it's more than just a different cover, because there's a lot of people that they do a collector's edition, all they do is just slap a different cover on them, or they do a leather bound, and everything inside is, they just glue the normal edition inside. They're like, but we have a leather bound version. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
but
fine.
yeah,
Call it the leather
yeah,
bound version, don't call it a special edition or a deluxe edition.
yeah. I think you have to make it special. You have to get new features. That's what video games do all the time.
Yeah. Extra art, is something, just better paper. I don't care if all the rules inside are exactly the same, but if you tell somebody it's a collector's edition or deluxe edition, and literally the paper and everything inside is, they just took the standard edition and glued it into a nicer cover. I always feel um, gypped, like somebody promised me something, gave me a taste of it.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that I've been playing around with my head in my head, and it's like, yeah, let's see, what can we do? CloudSea, okay, yeah, CloudSea. If we're going to do a hardcover for the next release, right? Like a special edition, we'd do the base CloudSea, add the adventure onto it. Hey, why not Iconics too? Things like that.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, I mean, just it's making it a more enticing thing, and you also want to, especially if you're doing this as a reward to get somebody to kick in a few more bucks into a Kickstarter. You gotta entice them with it, because I know some people, they just click on they just, oh, I will always do the collection editions of it, and uh, then they get it and they're just like, oh, why do I do this? Then there's other ones you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. Somebody in the chat said extra art, pull out maps, punch out characters. There's a ton of little things that you can do to make the experience of someone getting the next level game, make them
Yeah,
feel like they are part of something way cooler. And
and I
hopefully that makes them want to share the experience.
yeah. Something I can actually speak to on that front is we did think about physical rewards. That would include things like punch out figures, things like that, like paper minis with stands and stuff like that, like cardboard minis with stands and things like that. That got into the point where we are. It was basically a two-person operation. Um, the cost did not, and the cost of that would have been such that it made it a bit unreasonable for us to do things like here are CloudSea dice that are this special color with a symbol on it to represent the six, for example.
Yeah,
Uh, because while that would have been nice, it would have been great. It's also one of the things that the costs associated with it was just it made it untenable.
yeah, and it also adds a lot on your lead time, because uh, when did your campaign close out?
The campaign closed August 2021.
Yeah, so yeah, you closed out August. You wanted to be in people's hands by October, so August, September, October. That's 3 months, and that's doable if you're doing everything the way that you were doing it. But if you want to have more physical rewards, like dice, your lead time on all that is considerably higher, because you've got to
Oh yeah.
get everything submitted. You go, okay, we had 150 backers, and you know we need to order 170, at least 175 sets of dice. That way, we get enough, and we can make sure that they're not we don't have any errors, so that we can get all 150 out. And then you got to wait for all that stuff to come on a slow boat from China. uh,
Yeah, no, something that we did was, and so we closed out in August, and uh, we we said, okay, PDFs, thick or thin, they're coming out in August. Uh, Come September 1st, and we're like, okay, we don't have all the art. That's when we're going through the logistics, and we're like, oh God, art. Um, and it was at that point, September 1st, I sent out an update saying, okay, guys, we're going to send you version 0.95 of 0.95 of CloudSea because we want to get this into your hands. We don't want you to just wait and wait and wait and wait. So we're going to send out this. I don't want to call it a beta because the first half of it was finished, like,
a,
but the expansion packs were not added on yet.
yeah, a pre-release or a preview copy.
Yeah, essentially, like here's the base game without the expansion packs. Those are coming later once we get things figured out because mea culpa, I made a mistake.
but you have learned from your mistake, and hopefully, people that are watching and they can learn from all of our guests' mistakes that have done Kickstarters, or I mean, even people that have worked for companies, they've given good advice on um, keeping schedules and just figuring things out, because just because you're a two-man shop doesn't mean that a lot of the techniques and uh, um, tricks that people do at medium and large game companies have to offer doesn't mean that you can't learn from those as well.
Oh, definitely.
um, what are some of the things that excite you going forward?
Excite me going forward. Well, I noted that the Pirates of the Cloud Sea, how it's a dual release almost.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of combining mediums, making it a multimedia experience. Like, here's your 5e adventure. Here's also, and here's your visual novel to go with it. That's set in the same setting that has to do with the adventure. The idea of doing that is very exciting to me as a designer because I that is uncharted waters for me. Uh, this idea of, oh, here's a game along with your tabletop game. Here's a video game along with your tabletop game. If you want to call a visual novel a tabletop game, a visual novel a video game. I know there's some contention there, but um, this idea of, is the audience going to like this? Because I'm definitely putting lots of love into it. But is the target demo just wrong? Is the big question, and there's only one way to find out.
Yeah, and because something like that is tough, because you can ask the question all day long, and you can get 1,000 people tell you, oh, that's exactly what we want, and you can also get 1,000 people say, no, that's just silly, and once you if you abandon it, you never know, and if you put it out, you may hit a home run, and you may have, have just hit a little bunt and stumble across the line. So you never know, because it is something that a lot of people haven't really done. It is definitely uncharted waters. A lot of game companies have done well by novelizing stories. D&D has done that for ages. Warhammer 40K, they do their tabletop, be it RPGs or minis, but I mean they've got tons and tons of books. I mean they have their own um, publishing company. That's how many they do. But you look around, there's tons of companies that have done stories. Small company locally that did a game called Identico. They actually started out by releasing short stories and then releasing the game.
Mm.
Um, they were going to events talking about the game and selling their collection of short stories to get people excited about the world they were building, which I thought was really cool. I actually really like that idea, because it got people interested in the world that they were building. And it would be funny because I saw people at events like, oh yeah, I picked up your book a couple conventions ago, and I read through it. Man, I'm so excited to play. And then they would run demos of the rules in progress, and then people really got invested in the world, which
Mm.
I thought was such a really cool idea. And somebody brings up Cyber Symbiosis, a game that we played. We had people playing on stream. It's based on a web comic, and
Very cool.
so I mean, there's a ton of ways to do this. I like the risk that you're taking of doing an audio book or a visual book. Um, it's an interesting risk, and I have my fingers crossed that it'll do well, because it is something that you can put out there and hopefully get people excited about the world that you're creating, so that they can, for lack of a better term, stumble into the RPG after that.
It's the sort of thing where, as I mentioned before, I don't think we're done with CloudSea. This is not a one and done deadline. That's something that I think you've asked me before when I came on. So is this a one and done? Uh, I can officially say no, 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 it's not. Uh, took quite a bit of thinking. It's going to be a little bit of a risk. This is the sort of thing where I'm using a lot of base assets, for example, but spending a lot of time. And time is money. Uh, but a lot of base assets, public domain stuff, royalty-free stuff, uh, uh, community commons to build the base game, minus a few things that I think are absolutely necessary, like, I need characters. like, uh, but art and music, for example, that's the sort of thing that I can just use public domain stuff for until I know I can get funding for that.
Yeah, well, and the nice thing that you're based kind of in that 1920s. There's a ton of stuff that's in that era that is all public domain, so that
Yeah.
gives you some leeway to uh, tinker with, real world assets that are now available for everything.
Funny you should say that. Because that is a lot harder than one might think. I ran into issues while researching this. So the music itself is in the public domain, but performances of the music are not necessarily.
Correct, because a lot of the recorded performances by specific artists are, I think it's 1924 is like the cutoff. So finding recordings prior to that are decent quality prior to that are really tough. So you end up running into recordings from 1930 of the same thing, and you're like, oh, I really want to use this. Oh, that one's not royalty free because that one was recorded and put out in 1930, not 1924.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where right now I think it's 1932 is the date. I had to do
Yeah,
some research
yeah.
for
So past 24, there's like because there's several different year markers, but like 1924 and older, technically everything is relatively. So like Mickey Mouse is not public domain, but Steamboat Willie is. Uh, and there's a very big distinction between in Disney between Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse. Um,
yes.
and it's because they weren't able to get the copyright laws to extend just enough to catch Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, it's navigating copyright very tricky.
Yes.
Wish I can say more about this, but
That's why
I
there's an
can't for
entire
reasons.
section of law that is copyright law, uh, and
Yeah,
lawyers that specialize in it.
yes, it's definitely tricky, especially when you run into the nightmare that is H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah, because you can use all his early stuff, but none of his later stuff. So you can use certain monsters out of Lovecraft, but not the later. And you're just like,
Well,
oh,
it's also even more complicated by the fact that uh, se 70 years, death plus 70 years, right?
yeah,
Um, uh, but there's also the fact that a lot of the stories that he wrote after that time like everybody knows that the the Call of Cthulhu, like Cthulhu, is
Yeah.
public domain.
Yes.
But Cthulhu actually falls after the date that we were just talking about. Uh, Cthulhu is public domain because of a technicality in that the copyright wasn't renewed because at a certain point in time you had to renew copyright.
Yes.
Uh,
Which
and
is why It's a Wonderful Life is so played on TV. Someone forgot to renew the copyright on it.
yeah, and it's a nightmare to navigate because especially because at this point in time, I don't think there's anyone who can prove which H.P. Lovecraft stories have been renewed because one would have to go into the physical records
Yeah.
of the 1930s and 40s and try to find, okay, yeah, we're looking for one Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah. And it is a nightmare. Well, there was one recently, a artist out of Ukraine doing a little web series. Um, it was a video game. Name of the video game is Arc something, and her webcomic had the name Arc in it. And basically, the video game company hired a third party company to go do copyright strikes. Basically, hey, can you go
Oh,
search? And there's basically a redheaded character in the story, and there was a redheaded character in this video game. So they just they did a copyright strike, and they took down everything that this little, young lady from Ukraine had done. And she's like, "What WTF?" And they have since like, "Oh, we apologize." And it's funny because in the apology, they never mention her by name or anything. And I was like, man, you took this poor lady's entire work down for a while. At least as a much larger company, in your apology, you can give her a shout out and hopefully get her some business for
I,
almost ruining her livelihood.
I've never liked the idea of punching down. Uh,
Well,
and
and I get why, because companies have to be, especially like I'll go with Games Workshop because a lot of people pick on Games Workshop for how litigious they can be, but there's a reason that they are very protective of their IP because they have a very specific world that they've crafted. In fact, all of the stuff that Black Library's put out, there's only one love story, and it's between two Dark Eldar, and it is a creepy story, but it fits with the Dark Eldar aesthetic. If they weren't very tight with their IP, there'd be a ton of fanfics of space wolves, marrying and retiring from being a space marine after 600 years, something silly like that. And it can damage a brand, so I get why they do that. But you have to be very careful that you're going after the story that somebody's writing of Ragnar Blackmane, the space wolf that is retiring from being a space marine and marrying a fair maiden on Fenris versus somebody that's writing a generic space marine story that isn't set in the 40K universe.
yeah, it's part of the reason why I mentioned that I'm building a system from the ground up, inspired by different other systems. Um, it's part of the reason that I am very highly considering. So, as you mentioned, you can't trademark a game mechanic. At the
Yes.
same time, I think that the system that I want to build, I would like to include an OGL, just as a no, seriously, use this. You could already use this, but this is like me saying
Yeah.
publicly, like, go ahead.
Well, the one thing I like about doing open game licenses is it increases compatibility between systems. because like the one I always like to bring up is OpenD6. Uh, you know, someone else can make all the space based OpenD6 they want, and then somebody else can go buy all the old Star Wars books and incorporate it in because the systems match.
Yeah.
Um, uh, there's there's niceties in those similarities, so that you can build a game that exists in a world that already has stuff that can make your world more expansive without you killing yourself trying to release 100 expansions already.
Yes. Yes.
You just got to do it without totally ripping off the original work, because you want somebody to build upon what you're already working on, but you don't want them to outright steal what you're building.
Right.
Because hopefully, fingers crossed, somebody else will be like, oh, I love this idea, I like the system they're building. Let me do something as well, and maybe they'll through their work they'll attract people to your work.
And make that makes sense. I like to think of the tabletop games community as very tight knit, and one that generally likes to help each other. I know that CloudSea would not have happened if the tabletop community, uh, both people that I know and people that I've just had passing conversations with, and people who had never met before, uh, didn't come together and say, "Hey guys, look at this! This is cool."
Yeah, and that's one of the things we love about gaming in general is especially in RPGs we meet some great people all the time within the role playing game community, whether they be players, be creators. You know, we've met artists. We've one of our early interviews was with a gentleman out of the UK that had never played role playing games before, had been into music, and then he just started making it's after his like first game experience, started making music for role playing games so that people could add some extra ambiance to their game sessions. And I was like, stuff like that. I was like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah,
It,
that's very cool.
it's really interesting to see um, the inspiration that people can get off of just gaming and being around, for the most part, really good people. We always run into bad people, and people like to harp on, oh, God, there's horrible, toxic people, but they're such a small part of the community. Yes, they can. We all remember them, but I mean, I've sat down with thousands of people, and I have fewer than 100 people that I would put into that toxic category that I've ever played with, and the thousands of people is not counting the people that I've sat down and played one shots with at events. The thousands of people that I've played with over the years is the thousands upon thousands of people that I've played with over the years, multiple games, um, and I would put maybe 30 people into that. Oh, I don't ever want to play with that person again category. But we all remember sadly we remember and harp on the negative, and we forget about all of the positive that is in this community, all the people that just invite people to sit down at the table, that, hey, I don't know who you are, do you want to play, um, or, hey, I hear you having a bad time, we're going to be playing a game over at my house, would you like to come over and escape for a couple hours.
Yeah.
You just
Uh,
see that so often.
that's part of the reason that it's something that we discussed slightly before the stream started, though people were listening in, apparently, was that I had recently just set up a YouTube channel.
Hmm.
Uh, one video, in the process of making another for this upcoming week. Uh, that video is what is D&D? D&D is not the be all end all of RPGs, but it is. If I titled the video "What are RPGs?" not as many people would get it. uh, the video is essentially what are RPGs, but I had to title it "What is D&D?" because that's that's what most people would understand if they've never been exposed to the community before. Um, and something that I wanted to highlight was the good interactions uh, with uh, with the community. Something that I'm never going to touch upon or touch upon in its own video or as a separate aside would be, well, you do run into the problem players and the problem people in the community, but I don't want to focus on that because there's
Yeah.
so much good in the community.
And I think that's I love that because I did watch the video and I think you did a pretty decent job. Looking forward to some more stuff coming from you on that project. And my wife just linked it in the chat. But I always get frustrated with uh, how we dwell on the negative and we forget to really pump up the positive of it. Um, Exactly, and somebody said in the chat, there's already tons of videos about bad players, and I think we as a community need to, uh, every time we do a video or we talk about the negative players, we chase away someone that's thinking about playing. Like, there's all this, and like, it just if a player's not right for your group, then move on. You'll find more players. If you've got a bad experience with a GM, move on. There's more GMs, and thankfully, we're not living in the '80s where uh, where you had no communication with other people, and you only had to depend upon the 7 people at a school that might be slightly interested in playing. You can you can find so many groups to play with online. The world is a much bigger place thanks to the internet, and thankfully how popular RPGs have continued to get over the last decade. Well, let's say 20 years,
I,
and
I'd like to thank uh, two things for that explosion. I think, especially in the past, I'd say 10 years. I'd say Critical Role has been a big help introducing people to RPGs. Not everybody is a fan of Critical Role, but I think that those people are excellent faces for the community. Um, and the second one would be Stranger Things, actually. Uh,
yeah, I honestly, I was never able to get in the show, but I know so many people that have gotten into role playing games because of Stranger Things, um, and a lot of gamers love Critical Role, and they give Critical Role a lot of credit, but I think Stranger Things is probably a 50 to 1 greater force because. Growing up in role playing games, I started as a little kid. I watched them die in the '90s, and then I watched the resurgence in the early 2000s. And honestly, a lot of it was because of D&D 3.0 and the the D20 license that they put out, and everybody started making RPGs. So you saw a lot of small companies, a lot of interesting content that popped out because of that, and then you just more people. D&D 3.0 made the game because D&D was a household name already, but like 3.0 made the game more accessible to people because
yeah,
it I don't want to say dumb down the rules because I always hate it when people like, oh, it dumbed down the rules. I was like, it made the rules just more sensical. for
yes,
it just you didn't have to explain because the rules in 3.0 are not typically any easier than they are mechanically than they are in second edition. They're much easier to explain and they're much easier to scale because if you've got some
right.
people that are struggling, you can scale it back. You can kind of strip some things out. So uh, watching that happen and then seeing the growth of people trying to do stuff online and getting groups like Critical Role doing online shows and people in producing something people want to watch. Is it's nice watching all those building blocks go along over the last 20 plus years
Right.
of RPGs.
And I think it can all sort of culminate with the introduction of D&D 5th edition, where this is an RPG that I love to explain it this way. D&D 5th edition is a great game to get people introduced to RPGs in general. It is not hard to learn. It is accessible,
Mm-hmm.
like, uh, and it is the sort of thing where if I were to sit four people down who've never seen an RPG before in their life, I could probably get them running a character in an hour.
Absolutely, yeah. It took all the good things from third edition and boiled them down into a way that you can get pretty much anybody playing within a short amount of time. And I also love that it kind of breaks at level 10, so you get a lot of people that do play a handful of games. And they're like, I want to try something else. But because of especially something like Stranger Things, well, I mean even the TV show Community, they did D&D
Right.
episodes, um, and it's one of my favorite. Freaking seeing what's his name all painted up like a drow. Why can't I think of his name all of a sudden? He was played played Chang. He's a comedian, freaking hilarious. But seeing him because I grew up loving the drow characters in D&D. So seeing him just total in makeup shows up to, but he's in normal clothes, dressed in with the white wig, the ears, the contacts, and just jet black skin. But he's still in his normal clothes, playing with everybody else. Just like, oh, this character's so over the top. It introduced stuff like that, getting D&D into or back into media because in the 80s we had the D&D cartoon, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many people I ran into in the late 80s that played because of that cartoon, and they were all sad because none of the weapons existed in the game. Because man, did I want that bow when I was a kid.
Yeah. Um. Well, I have a minor question for you. You said you
Yeah,
liked the Drow characters.
yeah.
Drist or Jarl Axel?
Um, I never had a preference after that because I liked most everything that was put out for them. I liked the lore of them. I liked there's just so many things that they did in every release, every setting. It was one of the few things that, because growing up, I never really picked up any of the box sets or anything. But if it had Drow in it, I would try to get my hands on it to at least read through, because they were just such a fascinating thing to me. Because every other story, elves had always been like the super good guy, magical. Everybody wanted to do Tolkien based elves. So as a little kid, we either had Tolkien elves or we had Santa's elves. Those were your choices, and then here comes Drow. This entire like we're turning elves on their head, and I always enjoyed picking up anything that I could uh, to get a new taste on doing elves a different way.
Well, there's been a resurgence in the past few years of making elves more fey, more alien and dangerous in a sense.
Yes, I've seen some really cool stuff with that, and I like it when, not for the sake of just turning things on the head, but the sake of making something that can be expansive. And that's why again, that's why I've loved elves, because orcs have always kind of been a boring thing, and people they try to, I want to do a player character orc, and they just play him as a brutish human. they don't get too far into them. But again, I always loved the Drow because they they took everything about the elves, not only turned them on the head, but they made them a really cool key center point to stories. And they had some really, like, they had their own lore. They weren't, they weren't evil elves for the sake of being evil elves. They were an entire new story, and really interesting way of going about it.
Yeah.
Somebody said they were different. They were way different from other races, and they work well for angsty teens. Okay, I'll agree with that one. I was only a mildly angsty teen, so that's why I
Uh,
didn't get into Vampire the Masquerade when I was a teenager, because I wasn't angsty enough. Uh, what was your favorite RPG growing up? What
my
what R,
favorite RPG.
what one
Hmm.
did stuck out to you the most, that fit your personality as a teenager?
Um, it was definitely Call of Cthulhu. Let me pull up which edition. I think it was sixth edition Call of Cthulhu. No, not fifth. Let's take a look at sixth. Yeah, it was sixth edition Call of Cthulhu.
I liked
It
Call of
was.
Cthulhu. I just couldn't find enough people to play with.
I was introduced to it by my uncle, and then I got into running it myself. And I had this multi-year, multi-generational game where
Nice.
I basically started the characters off in, if I remember correctly, it was just before America was introduced to the Europeans. And going on from there, we'd have arcs where there was because as I think a lot of people know, the livelihood of characters in Call of Cthulhu is dubious at best. So there were multiple arcs, and each arc we moved slightly forward in time with characters who were related in some way, either by blood or uh, friendship or acquaintance, like work, but into the previous characters. Uh, and it lasted from the founding of basically the Europeans coming to America all the way up to modern times, which at that point were the 2000s.
It was making me think of, as you were talking about, it made me think of a TV show that I've always wanted to kind of see. Well, it's an old story. It's a TV show based on an old story. Sleepy Hollow. So it came out a
Ah,
few years ago, and the main character is cursed by a witch. So um, he's a main character during the Revolutionary War, and he is brought forward to modern times,
yeah,
and then there's all kinds of things that like the sheriff and the police officer that he's working with, like they have connections back to people in his time. So you were making me think about that. That's something that I've always wanted to figure out, and I think the Cthulhu world is probably one of the best ways to set that up. And I think Sleepy Hollow could be an interesting, story to tell within the Cthulhu world.
it's definitely interesting. It was interesting for me at least to like be able to look at my old notes and like, okay, we're in the Civil War now. What if we call back to a character from the American Revolution that one of my players actually played, and have one of his findings after he inevitably, well, got thrown into the equivalent, the that age's equivalent of an asylum, like one of his writings that he scrawled down because he knew too much about the eldritch secrets of the universe, and like calling back to the player's old characters was always fun.
Yeah, that's actually really cool because I mean, even just the mechanics of playing in the Call of Cthulhu world, because you're dealing with supernatural, but you're not dealing with sword and sorcery, and you're not dealing with lasers. So the mechanics that make Cthulhu work in the 1920s also make it work in the modern world. Also make it work in Civil War or Revolutionary War. You're not dealing with it. You're dealing with a system that is not limited to just the time frame. It's everybody
Right.
thinks it's set in. I
There's
like that.
Cthulhu Invictus as well.
Yes. And not a whole lot of people know about that or have ever played it, or if they have, they don't share it as often. Um, but yeah, the base rules for Cthulhu, which weirdly, Call of Cthulhu is the most popular RPG in Japan. Um, I don't know whether it's because D&D just didn't catch on over there, or it's the
Giant sea monster.
it's the giant monsters or tentacle monsters. All the things that that we find in Japanese media already, but set in a horror trope.
Japanese horror, great stuff to
Yeah.
pull from.
Yes.
Something that I've wanted to do if I can find somebody who like lived in Japan to work with would be a Japanese horror setting. But I need to find somebody who lived in Japan to work with them, because although I know a lot about Japanese culture, Japanese history, like I've read my textbooks, I've done my classes. It's much more. It'd be much easier if I were to sit with somebody who
Yeah.
lived in Japan or Zoom
There's a
call
big
them. And
difference between studying it and getting the lived idiosyncrasies of it. And
yes,
we have a few people within our community that have lived in Japan, and doing well, what 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? A gentleman doing New Edo, so it's
uh,
Japan futuristic game,
I,
and
I I've seen that.
yes, um, so I think that was 2 weeks ago. But yeah, we have some people within our community that um, we can hook you up with. But yeah, the Call of Cthulhu settings is a really cool set of rules. So got a question that one of our Patreon backers always asks. So, and I think I asked you in the past, but we'll ask it again: hot dogs or tacos?
Okay, so I might have answered differently back then because back then I was still on a vegetarian diet. Now I am not. So I will safely say tacos.
Nice. But you can do vegetarian tacos. It's like a bean burrito.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Just having that extra flavor of some ground beef seasoned just right, or a little uh, carne asada, yeah, a little pulled pork or something like that in a taco, just adds so much more.
I would have continued. I just don't have the willpower.
It is tough. The people I know that are vegetarian, they're good people. They're strong. The people I know that are vegan, that's the first thing they tell me about is how their veganism's doing. um, I, I I can be a vegetarian for a meal once in a while, but things like bacon, nope. I like bacon on stuff. Sorry.
I lasted 2 years, so that's nothing to
That's
sneeze at. But
2 years is a good time.
at the same time, it was one day I was just at an Applebee's and I was like, I want a steak.
Uh, we had a good friend. He and his wife went vegan, and it was about 2 years, and we're out to dinner, and we order, and then he goes, I want a steak, And she goes, "But honey, we're vegan." He goes, "No, honey, you're vegan. I want a steak." I just the look on her face. He goes, I'll eat all the vegan stuff that you make at home, but when we got to dinner, I'm getting a steak." Just it was great because it was kind of the same thing. It's just like you said, you were out at an Applebee's and you're like, "I want a steak." It was. I remember that the look on that poor girl's face. She was like, "What? My entire world." She didn't realize that he had been doing all the vegan stuff specifically because for her. It's goes to those relationship things. Got to communicate, but for a good relationship, you got to communicate. And sometimes you make sacrifices to make the other people in the relationship happy. Whether it be your personal relationships or business relationships. Talking about building those relationships with artists earlier. Um, you know, you've learned a lot how to communicate with them, and sometimes make a sacrifice on your vision for their vision, and
Yeah.
they'll make sacrifices on their vision for your vision because they want a paycheck. It's building those relationships and understanding your boundaries. That's a big problem, especially people that are givers. If Lackey's still in the chat, he's got a syndrome we call a helium hand, and he needs to get better with it. Helium hand is, "Hey, I need a volunteer." There goes the hand. Yeah. So yes. So Lackey, you got to get better at least tying some weights to the hand. But I have to thank his helium hand because while I was gone out of country, Lackey and my wife did so much for the library to keep it around, and especially every time I was doing one of these interviews, I was in Ukraine. My wife back here doing all the legwork, getting everything ready, reaching out to people. So we've had some great volunteers that have helped out.
On duty.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I was in Ukraine for about a year. Oh jeez. Lackey just said he might be running the game department at New York Comic Con. Why do I have a feeling that there's some helium involved in that particular comment there, Lackey? But hey, if you're at New York City Comic Con, that'll give us an end to get the library there. I would love to take part of the library to the New York City Comic Con. I would love to try to get people excited about just gaming. I was watching a video and I want to talk with a guy. He was like, why are there so few black people that play role playing games? And he made 4 great points. And I'd love to sit down with him and figure out how we can break the stigma of RPGs in modern black culture, because that's one of our biggest hurdles is getting to get more just more people playing is cultural stigmas within different groups.
It's very interesting that you say that, because the youth group that I've been asked to speak to, mostly demographically black, and so I'm coming into it as a Puerto Rican who grew up in a black community. I grew up in the Bronx, uh, mixed community.
Yeah.
But I grew up in the Bronx, and so I get that stigma.
Yeah.
I totally understand it.
Something connected to my computer. I don't want it. Oh, so hopefully that little echo. Exactly, and Lackey apparently has seen the video too, and he's like one of his third bullet point of the videos. Why would blacks play RPGs? That's a white thing white people do. I don't know our. Uh-oh. Somebody said we lost audio. Hang on a second.
Hmm.
Do you guys still have me? Audio is looping and echoing. Yeah, it's something Bluetooth connected to my computer.
I can check to see. No, it wouldn't be on my end.
Yeah, it's not on your end. No, I didn't open a window. Something Bluetooth connected to my computer. Interesting technical difficulty. Hang on. Let me. I'm just going to turn Bluetooth off, see if that fixes it. Oh, okay. I still hear a weird echo.
Odd.
Yeah, that's really, really weird. Let's see. Can everybody hear me now? Waiting for responses in the chat. Hey, okay. Miguel, go ahead and see if they can hear you.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yay! Yeah, that was weird. So my Bluetooth was on my computer, and something something in the house turned on and sent everything through a tizzy. Note to self: make sure Bluetooth is off before I do this in the future. It's fun doing this because I swear every week it's a new adventure in what can just go weirdly wrong. So now we're hearing a high-pitched hum. Okay, I can only fix one thing at a time. I don't know how to fix the high-pitched hum. I don't know what's causing that because I hear it too.
Am I the only one who doesn't hear it?
It's something on my end. So fixing the weird echo and turning off my Bluetooth has caused a weird high-pitched hum. I hope it's not too annoying. We'll ignore the hum. So one of the bullet points he brought up in the video, and I've reached out to the gentleman. I would love to get him on and talk. Is saying that why would blacks play RPGs? It's a white thing. Why do blacks want to do white people activity? And that was his third bullet point. And it's funny because it's something that, having worked with at-risk teens and gotten people, growing up, and when he said that. Growing up, most of the black people that we had that came in and played games, they were the guys that were like super excited about anime and stuff, and didn't fit in culturally with with the black cultural norms. And I've worked with some at-risk teens, and they're not the anime super geek that I've dealt with in the past, and trying to get them excited about playing a role-playing game has been tough, but you get them doing it. You get them doing an activity that is consistent, and gives in some. Also, it's something that they can do, and I hate to say keep hidden from other people. And I always get frustrated when people hide their geekiness or hide their love for something. But if we can get people playing and they get excited about it, later on they can break out about it.
Right. As somebody who I'm Puerto Rican, Afro-Caribbean, but not black. But I wouldn't consider myself black. I'd consider myself Latino. As somebody who grew up in a similar culture, where you didn't admit to playing D&D or things like that.
I've had a very hard time getting Hispanics into RPGs over the years.
it's been the sort of thing for me that growing up in the Bronx, not the best neighborhood. It kept me out of trouble.
Hey, yeah,
And I think that's why I stuck with RPGs and it started as a hobby, it became a job, now it's an obsession. But I mean that in a good way. I mean that in
yeah,
a good way.
yeah. Because not all obsessions are bad.
I think one of the so gonna get a little serious here. Uh, I've dealt with mental health issues for many years. Um, Part of it stemming from how I grew up. Part of it stemming from medical issues. I myself am I'm what you would call psychotic. Uh, so I have a host of symptoms that make my life a bit harder than it is for most people. I've learned how to live with these symptoms, but it also came with uh, lack of wanting to. It came with a severe lack of excitement for anything because everything that I felt could go wrong was going wrong in my life, and RPGs were that one bright spot. I could
Nice.
pretend to be somebody I wasn't. And for those 4 or 5 hours, everything was all right.
And I like that you put it that way because a lot of the people with PTSD that I've done any gaming with, it's given them that moment to escape. And for some of them, it's given them that moment to escape, and they realize that there's more that they can do in life, and they seek the help. So there's a lot of good things that we can do with role playing games, and I'm always trying to figure out how to get more people to sit down at the table. I don't care what your background is. I don't care where you're from. I want you to sit down at the table and experience something that's fun. At least for me, is fun and in a moment of escapism, and it's not sitting in front of the boob tube or sitting on YouTube or Instagram. You're taking a moment to be part of something bigger for just a few hours in your life, and and hopefully you can learn something and expand yourself as a human. And the more people we can get sitting down at the table, the more people that can talk out, like yourself. Like I said, I've struggled for years getting more Hispanic people sitting out at the table because culturally it is not a thing. Living down in Texas, I was the only white guy living in an all Hispanic neighborhood, and nobody in that neighborhood would have played an RPG with me. But they were all great people, and they invited me over. I went to more quinceañeras than I knew were available in 1 year.
Sounds
And
like my experience with bar mitzvahs.
I've only been to a couple of those, but
Huh.
I would love to always sit down and and you hearing your experiences and how they helped you find something to be interested and passionate about, and develop a healthy obsession around is awesome. Oh, I think he froze. Oh no, we were just getting into some harder topics. So we've been on. Holy cow, we've been on for like 2 hours. we're having fun here. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up. Um, I'll get back with Miguel. We'll try to get him back on and maybe delve into some deeper topics. And I really want to get some or like the gentleman with Epic RPG. I think is his YouTube channel, if I remember correctly. Um, he's got some pretty good content. Go look through. He's a pretty interesting guy, and I would love to get him on and have a chat with him and figure out how groups like the library can reach out to people, or how we can get with gentlemen like him to go into these communities and maybe get some, black and Latino youth to come to events. See if we can get them tickets and get them to experience what a game convention is, what a Comic Con is, and sit down and play games that's out of their norms, so they can, hey, this isn't bad. I can bring this back. Get people like Chris Spivey and Mike Pondsmith and Cody Pondsmith and Miguel and these other people that we've gotten chances to sit down and talk with, and get them to come to events, and or maybe get out to some of these communities and give chats with people. So thank you all for coming today. We're going to go ahead and close the library. Oh, says his internet died. Well, we've had a good discussion today. We got a good catch up on CloudSea. I went and finally ordered our copy through DriveThru, which was nice because it was like $13 with shipping, and hopefully it'll be here soonish, and we can have Miguel back on and maybe walk us through a game. Well, it's 5th edition, so anybody should be able to run that. See, tomorrow we have news. I don't know if we have anybody scheduled for next week. I got to get really onto scheduling more people. And so, oh geez, I got the hiccups out of nowhere. Good timing. So we need somebody for February 6th for interviews. I will start really pushing on that tomorrow and see who we can get kind of last minute. But anyways, news and Kickstarters tomorrow. It's the last day of January. Yeah, January's already over. And then the following week we'll be getting Enix back on so that we can start doing reviews of systems. We're gonna pick some oddball systems to do, and we are looking forward to seeing you guys all again in the future. So you folks have fun, and I just finger gunned. Um, I'm tired. We were up late. We went to go see a concert, and if you get a chance, go see Volbeat and Ghost. They both put on a pretty good show. So library's closing for now, and I'm gonna go get some lunch. And thank you all for coming.